So I've been getting into luggables recently, and this one is about as luggable as it got in 1985-86, which is when it came out. It's called the Sharp PC-7000, and it's got a thin film screen display, so it's got a flat screen basically, no CRT business in this thing, and it even pops out like that, which is kind of weird. It's got 2 floppy drives, and there is an option, I believe, which came out with a hard drive. Anyway, this video is all about this machine today, so stay tuned. This video is sponsored by the very wonderful people at PCBWay. PCBWay are the leading electronics and prototyping manufacturer. If you've got an idea, you can use PCBWay to turn it into a reality. PCBWay can build PCBs from just $5 and build them for you in around 24 hours. PCBWay also do 3D printing, CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, injection molding, and so much more. They are widely reputed by us in the retro computing community as being the go-to supplier of your PCB needs. So if you've got an idea for an electronics project, why don't you give PCBWay a try at PCBWay.com? After all, that is the PCB way. We thank PCBWay for sponsoring Al's Geek Lab. Now, let's get back to the video. So here is the Sharp PC-7000. It's pretty disgusting. In fact, when I got it, I've had it kicking around the house now for about probably 2 years, and that's quite embarrassing because I had made a project that I'd said to get this thing up and going, and I switched it on briefly and then did, well, absolutely nothing with it. So here's some specs on the Sharp PC-7000. It was released initially in the US and other markets in October of 1985 for a price of $1,795 US. That's quite a lot of money even today. And if we look at the weight of this thing, it's 19 pounds. So I'm not quite sure how much that is in real money. You can see me pulling off a sticker here because I bought it at a big barn sale, or a big it's like an IT recycler, a guy called Graham Torklington, thus the GT there. So I think he was an e-waste recycler or something like that, and just pulled together like masses. I've actually got a video on the channel somewhere of the masses of stuff that he had basically put together. It was a whole warehouse full of stuff. So really cool video, really good time going up there and seeing all the stuff that he had got, and I managed. So just a quick look around it. First thing I actually noticed here was that the keyboard cable itself was a bit manky, but worse still, it had a lot of fraying. So I was hopeful that the keyboard would still work after noticing all this damage to the rubber outside. Just a thing that happens with age. Now turning it round to the side, you can see that this unit has 2 floppy disk drives, and they've got quite an interesting little release mechanism. Yeah, so just 5.25-inch floppy drives on this unit. I do believe there is a version which comes with a hard drive as well as a single 5.25-inch drive, but I haven't seen it myself. Initially, this unit shipped with MS-DOS version 2.11. So let's flip the thing around onto its back and have a look at the ports that are available on it. There's a couple of stickers as well here, and we can see that there's the power on the far right there. There is a serial port and a parallel port. There was an optional modem for this, which came at $349. And the small port, which you can see at the right hand side, I believe was also an option, and it's a color video output, so an RGB CGA style output. So yeah, that apparently on the display itself, 640 by 200 graphics and 80 by 24 text. So yeah, all in the standard sort of CGA realm of display. Memory-wise, the unit shipped with either 320 kilobytes of RAM or supported up to a maximum of 704 kilobytes. Now, to get the keyboard out, you slide up 2 little clips on the side, and it flips out there. As you can see, the keyboard is just yellowed beyond belief. It's yeah, it's pretty gross. There's not an awful lot I can do about that. Just pretty sad. But yeah, and you can see that when I got this, somebody had stuck a piece of paper onto the screen. It's been there, I think, ever since the machine was decommissioned. The piece of paper was from a garage. In a car garage, that is, a mechanics perhaps, in the town of Hamilton. So it's just got some scribbles on it. But I find this sort of stuff fascinating. It's like a Times, a time bottle. And the date on it was Tuesday, the 10th of April, 1990. So I guess it saw use from perhaps up to 1990, from 1986 or 97 or something like that. And it's got some information about when it was used, and yeah, there was definitely information on the back there from 1987. So yeah, this machine obviously was in use in a garage in Hamilton off New Zealand, which is actually pretty cool. I like finding that stuff out, getting the story. Now you can see me there pulling the screen out. Yes, it's got a little bit of a tilt, which is somewhat useful when it's a really bad screen to see, as you will probably see later. It's got plenty of reflection, plenty of glare, but I guess that helps a little bit. Underneath the tilt button there is actually a contrast dial, which is just there. Pretty hard to see as well, but is tucked under there. On the display, it's got a little few power indicators and so forth, just to give you some idea of what's going on. So now time to clean this thing up, getting my old buddy isopropyl alcohol out and just basically going over the entire machine. It was absolutely filthy. Like, the camera here doesn't really pick up just how filthy and disgusting this was. So I'm going to leave it to your imagination. But as you probably will see later on, there was a spider living in this thing. Various things had come to life inside it. So I got plenty of help cleaning up this machine. It wasn't just myself who cleaned up this machine. There was plenty of hands involved cleaning this thing up. Absolutely disgusting. The keyboard itself is removable with a sort of RJ11 style connector. Get a bit fragile at its old age, and if you lose or damage that cable, then you might be in a very bad position, or it might just be a standard wired RJ11 straight through sort of RJ11. I don't know, and I haven't done my research on that one. So yeah, I'm trying my best here to keep that cable in as best condition as I possibly can. I don't want to screw around with that very much. Thank you very much. But yeah, again, if you can see all that sort of, there is through cable, you can see the cable come through, but if you look inside those twists there, you can see just how gross it was. And that's probably no shock because it was sitting inside a garage, a car mechanic garage. So yeah, that took me a long time just to get all the crud off that keyboard cable. So yeah, I bet you're glad you don't have to do that. So once I'd given it a sort of first look over to clean it up and make sure everything seemed okay, it was then time to see if I could get into the thing. And of course, me being me, and probably lots of people out there in a similar disposition, we don't read any manuals, we don't look for things online, we go, oh yeah, we've got this. And so I just went in there with a screwdriver and tried to get into the machine and see if I could take it apart. So yeah, this is my attempt at doing so, and I was like, oh yeah, it's a bit wiggly, but ultimately it took a little bit of figuring out before I could actually get into the machine, and I also took off some screws which I really shouldn't have, but those screw holes that you can see there, they're pretty deep and quite hard to get the screws out of. This one here is for a sort of an expansion port, and you can sort of see that below where my hand is there, and you can see it's kind of opened up a flap there. So that particular screw I don't believe was necessary for me to take out to get into the thing. So you could probably safely leave that one where it is, but I don't think it did any harm to take it out for the exercise in the end. That's the expansion port cover, which is a strange sort of interface. It looks kind of, at first glance, like a printer port sort of thing, but it's not. Perhaps that's where the optional modem went. I don't actually know what the expansion port was for. So at this point, I was blissfully ignorant as to the error of my ways in removing these screws. But hey, that's just life, I guess, in the world of retro computers and not reading manuals. And then with a bit of tugging away, I managed to get the top of the case off, or the back of the case, I should say. And yeah, it just kind of came away quite easily after that, just lifted off. And you can see those little lugs that I'm talking about just about above those little rubber feet. What is also interesting is I noticed that the case itself had the word stock on it. So maybe at one point in time that was a stock unit. It was used for demonstration purposes or something like that, which is quite interesting. Also, this Varta battery was in here, and well, I consider myself extremely lucky that that thing didn't melt all over the mainboard as those things from the 1980s do. So that thing is coming out. Just a quick look around, you can see all of the ICs, plenty of ICs all over this mainboard. And of course you can see these little edge connector style cables going through. Now I had no idea what was behind this, but you can see the ROMs there, and we can see various other chips as well. And I was just kind of thinking about things as I was going at this point in time, and I thought, there's a dead bug. Truly disgusting inside there. From memory at this point in time, I was just pushing in all these socketed DRAMs, I think, at this point, and then just looking at the expansion port there just to check it out. Unfortunately, when I was recording this video, I had what I believed was everything running fine, and then unfortunately for some reason my camera decided to record everything in slow motion and killed the audio of this section of the video. So as you may figure out here, I am just trying to speak to this video in as much as I possibly can from memory as to what I did on the day, which is considerable weeks after I actually made this video. But anyway, you can get a good close-up here of the main board in all of its beauty, and I'll be zooming in and showing you at different angles of the board at a later point. But you can see that it was quite well put together for 1985. You can see that they really packed an awful lot in. This white thing here in the middle, I'm kind of showing off at the moment, is where two boards actually join together. So there's some sort of bus connector that joins these two elements of the system together. So it's quite modular in its approach, and I guess that would have helped the repairman or woman at the time repair it. So yeah, I'm pointing there to the color connector for the color monitor. And those springy things are right above the 8086 CPU, which was quite cool because in 1985, the IBM PC was most definitely using the 8088. So this is a better performing machine. Ran at either 4.8 or 7.37. There was two modes in the BIOS that allowed you to choose which speed rating. So if it was too fast, you could slow it down to 4.8 megahertz just to get back to the speed of the original IBM PC or PC-XT. Getting in at this thing was pretty tricky, actually. So you can see that I've made a number of missteps on trying to figure it all out. Those little bunny ears, for example, were the first ones that I had problem with. They kind of sunk in. But you can see eventually me getting in at the machine here with these big screws at the bottom. When you flip the unit round, you'll see that there's two screws on the top of the unit as well, which need to be removed. They're just by the handles, which hold the sort of chassis on the handle part to the rest of the machine. So unscrewing those eventually allows the whole unit to come away. Now all that's left are these little ribbon cables which go off to the display and various other things in the machine like the speaker and so forth. So obviously those need to be pulled away, but just pulling it out a little bit just to see where everything goes. Everything's pretty explanatory here, though I did take a few shots just to make sure that I knew where everything went back, but in the end that was pretty unnecessary. All the little connectors are actually keyed and look quite good actually. Quite easy to work on for one of these sort of machines, because a lot of these luggables or portables or whatever they were called back in those days were actually quite hard to work on. I found this one pretty easy to work on. Yeah, nothing in this was particularly difficult once I actually got into it. I quite liked the fact that it was fairly serviceable, and everything really in terms of the motherboard was all just there. The bit where you get the PC speaker out is a bit fiddly, I guess, because it's kind of in underneath the top of the screen, and you have to kind of pull that out before you pull out the rest of what I would call the main assembly. The main assembly being the bit where the floppy disk drives here and the power supply and the motherboard is attached to it. It's all just one nice big chunk. So with everything out, this is the whole machine. It's a neat little package, as I say, the one big chunk, and then the display unit, very light. There's nothing really to it. There's just a little sort of ratchet at the back, which has that sort of white ratchet there, which allows the screen angle to be changed by about 5 degrees or so. It's not very much. And yeah, there's a contrast dial and the power button, and that's pretty much it on the assembly there for the screen. Very light, nothing much to it. And there is a little friend, Spider, that managed to make it into the computer somehow, and had obviously happily been living away there for quite some time, so I had to give him a new home. Now you see that these little feet had fallen off, and that's because I'd unscrewed the wrong holes there, and on the bottom of the case you can see those sort of 3 little holes. So yeah, if you ever need to get into one of these yourself, don't do it the way I did it. So at this point I took to a little bit of cleaning, but it was actually fairly clean inside. There wasn't too much yuck. So the main assembly really is pretty straightforward. On the right hand side here where the cables are going into, the sort of yellow cable and the other smaller cable, that's the power supply. Where I'm wiping here with the 2 big sort of strange grommetty things, they're holding in place the floppy disk drives. And obviously the motherboard is here sort of facing towards the table. Turning it around from the other side, you can see that connector in the white sort of area at the top left, and then here's the floppy drive from the underneath. Then the power supply is exposed here with some pretty hefty caps in there. So the next thing I wanted to do was take a look at the floppy disk drives and give those guys a little service, because there's probably some muck on the inside there. So clean the heads at the very least so that they have a fighting chance of working properly. So it became pretty apparent that these lugs, I don't know what you would call them, but they're strange looking guys. There's 4 of them keeping the drive held in. So these 2 over here, just a case of 3 screws holding them in. They've got sort of like rubber on the inside, so that kind of keeps them, I guess, steady from any vibration. The floppy drive assembly here is actually quite a clever little thing. It's basically one half height floppy drive bay, and there's 2 drives in there, and they've kind of rotated them on each other. I was quite surprised actually how reasonably clean the drives were. They were shiny, and I actually think that they probably work just fine as is. But you know, now that I have them out, worthwhile giving them a clean. The manufacturer of the drives is actually Canon, so not Sharp, but Canon, and they actually seem like pretty well made, sturdy drives. There's not a lot of nasty componentry. Everything seemed to slid in quite well, and I liked the whole design of the design approach was really quite nice. The fascia comes pretty much straight off, pretty easy to remove after that. And when I turned this thing around at this point, I did notice that it says on the side that it's a loan. So the case itself, it said stock. This one says loan. So I'm pretty sure this whole machine is made up of borrowed parts of some description. So it was quite interesting to see that. But yeah, the case obviously is quite yellowed, and I don't think I'm going to get much business out of that. I think it's always going to be the same. I'm not going to spend lots of time cleaning the case up. But yeah, the buttons themselves seem fine. So I got in some dust cleaner in there, and then also I'll go off and clean out the heads themselves. So I got my trusty old verbatim head cleaning kit. If you've never seen one of these before, they're supposed to be used like a few times. You get this sort of material on the inside, which we can use a few times, this sort of thing. But unfortunately, these aren't really sold anymore. So what I do is I have the material, and I just get some isopropyl on this, and then stick it in and rotate it around the disc heads, and it works just fine. It's never let me down yet. So reuse, right? Not even need to recycle, just keep on reusing. So yeah, here's me putting some isopropyl on the bit of, I probably put far too much on, but again, it's never seemed to cause me any problems. Just put this on here and then stick it back into that fake disc, and then obviously just turn the heads up and down, and swish the disc around as much as possible. Ideally, you can do this when your machine is actually switched on, but because I hadn't switched on the machine at this point to test it, I thought, well, best here just to stick the disc in and manually agitate the heads. So I'll just show you that now. So this is going in the top drive. So I'll manually slide the heads up, back and forth. And of course, I'll do the same for the other drive as well. You can see that eject mechanism working there whilst I ejected it out the top drive. So popping it back into the second drive, you can see that the insertion points for the actual disk drives themselves are quite small, and it's quite a fascinating whole mechanism. The whole thing about this disk drive is quite well engineered overall. I enjoyed it. So once I'd cleaned those heads, I put the disk drive back together, and then had a good old look at the motherboard and looked for any corrosion or anything that would seem like bad caps. And then this guy was the thing that immediately sparked my attention, and I was really worried to begin with that this battery here would have exploded or started leaking or something like that. And to my astonishment, I found that this battery, which I believe was from 1986, was absolutely intact, and I think was even potentially still working. I put the meter on it off screen, and it was still giving some voltage. But these things do eventually break. This battery brand was a Yuasa battery, 3-51FT-P, if that means anything to you. But it's a 3.6 volt, 50 milliamp hour, and yeah, I thought, well, this thing's going to blow up at some point in time. It's going to leak all over this motherboard and then kill the machine. And there's really very little you can do to get back from that. So I took these clippers to it and left as much of the cable on the board as I possibly could, so if I could fit a CR2032 or something similar back onto the board at some point to do the clock battery itself. But for now, that's basically off the machine, and I haven't replaced it with anything right now. But yeah, I'm incredibly impressed that the Yuasa battery brand, not like the Vartas. Vartas were pretty terrible, but the Yuasas here seem to work just fine, or at least stay running good all the way from 1986. Had a quick look for everything else on the motherboard that I could possibly look for, and everything seemed okay, so I was willing to take a punt and switch it on at that particular point in time. But before that, I thought I'll have a look at this keyboard and see what that's all about. and this keyboard was particularly nasty, not just because it was filthy, but also because the keys themselves feel like kind of sponges. It's not a good keyboard. It's kind of XT style keyboard, but the keys don't feel great. I mean, they feel okay, and I guess if you've got a luggable machine, having that sort of a keyboard was probably pretty good. On the side it says personal computer keyboard PC-7000 made in Japan by the Sharp Corporation, and obviously as you can see here it forms the bottom of the whole unit itself, so nicely packed away I guess. We've got the floppy drive all assembled again, put back in, and I sorted those lugs as best I could. I tightened them all up with the screwdriver, ready to go back in its cage once it was time to do so. And I think that time is about now, so here we go. So a moment of truth, let's stick in an MS-DOS floppy and see if this thing even switches on. Okay. The mechanism, I've got to say, for the floppy drives is rather weird. You sort of press the button to engage it. So without pressing the button, you actually can't engage the floppy, and then you press it again and it releases it like that. So you've got to push it in and then press the button and that's it engaged, and then you press it again and it's released. I don't think I've ever had a floppy drive that has a mechanism like that. Anyway, let's switch this thing on and hope for the best. Okay, it's making a strange noise. Let's tilt the screen. Oh, there's a noise. Now I don't know if you can make that out because that is not a good screen to look at. But the contrast is a bit scratchy, but does actually work. But there we go. It's booted into MS-DOS. Let's see if I can zoom in for you. Really, really difficult to see. Not good. Not good monitor at all. But this is one of the first, thin screens. I just don't know if I can make that contrast any easier for you to see. It's real bad, even for the naked eye. But it says Sharp PC-7000 system, firmware version 1.0A, copyright 1985 by Vadim Incorporated. And there we are in MS-DOS version 3.3. Okay, so there's no P key. I need a P, please, Bob. A, S, D, F, G, H, J, K, L. I've got to say, not a wonderful keyboard. Feels like I'm rubbing butter on something. But it looks like every key but the P is working after all these years. Yeah. So cool, almost everything working on the keyboard. Oh, look at this, we can get into the setup. So it's got like a CMOS setup as well. Again, I really don't know if you can see this. But the clock, obviously that's not going to work now because we took out the battery, which is a good thing, right? But you can change settings like the time and the clock, which won't make much use, I guess. The default date is 1984, 1st of January. Cursor blink, why that's important I don't know, but you can have 2 a second or 4 a second or no blink, 1 a second. It's a really weird noise from it. I don't even know where that humming is coming from. I don't think that's a good noise. But hey, I actually don't know what this little thing is for down here. There's a little slot that you can open with, and I kind of have no idea what it's for. Character blink, display mode graphics, so you can change it to text, mono, graphics. So yeah, graphics off and mono. So I guess you would switch it off maybe if you just wanted to run an external monitor. Backlight, oh look at that, a brightness backlight. Oi! Dim, standard and bright. I like bright, thank you very much. And you can time it out after 5 minutes. That's a good lot easier to see. You've got the internal SIO, which is the serial interface, or interface in and out. The baud rate is set to 1200, you can increase that to all the way to 9600 from 1100. 8N1, and then you can choose a COM port and a parallel port. Speaker, volume, processor speed standard, slow, standard or slow. So I guess that would take the 8086 down to 4.77 for compatibility, and I don't know what control space is, but it's a nice little touch that it's got the setup on a key on the keyboard. Kind of unusual. Sometimes you had to press like Control Alt S to get different sort of speeds, or sorry, into different setup settings. So that's kind of cool. But sometimes you could get into the BIOS in older machines. This one obviously just has a dedicated key. So it says press setup key to exit. So it's got a cursor down here. Oh, it's going to restart the machine. I see, or at least I think it is. And I'm going to see if I can quickly look into this keyboard. I don't know what it's doing now, but yeah, it just made more of a grating sound when I press Control Del. Just going to see if I can get into this keyboard. So I'm using a soft prizing tool to try and get into here, and it looks like those feet do pop off, and they allow me to get into the keyboard here. Sweet. I'll just take this apart. I don't know if you can hear. Sometimes it does it a bit more than others, but there's definitely some sort of something rattling about inside. Let's have a look at what this terrible keyboard is made from. I haven't actually felt a keyboard this bad in a long time. Unfortunately, this is using a proprietary RJ11 kind of connector. Or it's maybe not proprietary, it might just be a standard RJ11, but always makes it harder to deal with replacement keyboards. Those screws came out remarkably easy. It's almost like somebody's been in here before. That's never a good sign. Some filth coming out there. Ew. Now, get my soft prying tool again in there. Okay, that's coming open. There's a lot of dirt in there. It's not looking good. Okay, there's something up top keeping it stuck in. Maybe it's got something to do with these. Aha! Underneath the legs there is another screw. Those are much more stuck on. That's much more the sort of force I was expecting. Yeah, you can probably hear the audible click when I try to open that one off. So I think somebody has tried to get into this keyboard and got halfway through and then decided to give up or something. Interesting. Alright, hopefully that's all of the screws off now. But it's still giving a little bit of feedback. Hey, there we go. I think it was just being held together by dust. Ew. Absolutely disgusting. Yeah. Yes is the only answer to that. Yes, it is as disgusting as it looks. Date code on this, 86. Okay, here's the keyboard itself from the underside. We have like a discrete logic unit over here with the connector in it. And let's see if we can push this out. There we go. And again, absolutely filthy. I don't know if the camera picks that up, but that's supposed to be black and it's sort of a grey colour because of the dust. Just think of all dead skin. Yum. Okay, so let's see if we can't get in at that P key, because everything else is working. And I hate keyboards with a passion, almost as much as I hate printers. And I don't believe in pulling anything apart unless it absolutely has to be, because usually keyboards are a lot of hassle
So I'm going to concentrate pretty much only on that P key and see if there's something that I can do, but sometimes that's just too much trouble. I know that probably Adrian of Adrian's Digital Basement would probably get a lot better than me, because he's got some great videos on like fixing up keyboards, and he spends an awful lot of time fixing up keyboards, but I probably just don't have the patience for it, well, with my real life to contend to as well. But yeah, I kind of like this whole idea of a removable keyboard controller. I mean, that's quite good for serviceability. So yeah, that's a nice little touch. Let's just see if I can prise this P key off. Okay, there we go. So the keycap does come off, which is not a shock, of course. And you can see the type of really plasticky buttons there. So I don't have a lot of hope that this will just magically come back to life. But in any case, I don't know what was rattling about. Maybe it was this little piece of paper. It's like a bit of, yeah, a little bit of plasticky paper. It definitely doesn't look like it's supposed to be in there. So I'll give it a clean down and see what I can do with it. And I'll maybe test this as well. It's an Alps keyboard, though. Alps 12KE124G. It's got a bit of a bend in it, I think. Just a little bit of a bend in the board itself. So I did a quick baseline check of the resistances, and I can't see anything super wrong there, and there's continuity where I expect it, and all the resistances seem the same across the top sort of 3 keys there. So I'm thinking, well, that's maybe not what it is. So I'm just going to go back to basics and plug it back in and just see if mysteriously fixed itself just by taking everything apart. Sometimes. This is an absolute long shot, so I'm not expecting it to work, but here we go. Yep, doesn't work. So there's something on the top side which is causing the loss of contact, I'm assuming. Okay. So I decided to take off the whole keycap itself and see if I can fix anything up just by taking it off. Bit of an involved process actually, really difficult to take it off, so I ended up going under the scope really to get that done. And as you can see, I'm using the Andon Star scope that I got a while back. It's on one of my other videos, so check that out if you want. Now I'll just lift this off here, don't lose that. And then see if I can just, yep, okay, that comes off, apart from being a little bit grotty on the inside. Okay, so it's one of these horrible soft squishy connectors that these bulbs, I don't know what you call them, but it's not it's not good. They're just disgusting in the way that we're made. Okay, so we can get that out there. Cool. And then on to the actual filament or whatever it is, whatever you call them. Doesn't look too bad actually. Let's put that in focus there. Nothing in that is screaming, oh, I'm broken. So I'm wondering what it is particularly about it that's done. I guess a lot of these things you just cannot see even with a scope, right? But that, to me, apart from all the filth that's around it, looks pretty reasonable, I guess. So let's have a look and see if we can plug this in and hope and pray for the best. Here goes nothing. So I'm going to press the key with just the bare contact. Nothing going on there. So I'm going to put that rubber grommet or whatever you call it back in. Aha! It made a P. Just one? How very interesting. So there is some sort of contact there. We got another one and another one. Not very much coming from it, but certainly a contact of some description. So let's put some contact cleaner on it and see what we can get. So I'm assuming you can't read anything off that screen. I'll try this again. See what happens if I go down here and change the display to backlight bright. I don't know, that doesn't make any difference either, it's impossible to see. Okay, so I'm just going to go down and I've removed the top from the keyboard again, and I'm just going to spray some surface cleaner into it. Really difficult to get on camera, but there's some surface cleaner. It's probably just going to need the smallest of the amount. But just from what I saw, it looked clean enough. It looked good. There didn't seem to be anything wrong. So there's a lot of surface cleaner in there. It's very damp now. That made some sort of contact, I think. Unless that was some other key getting pressed by accident. Okay. So I've just put on the screen there what the grommet, I'm calling it a grommet, I actually have no idea what it's called, but that's what the grommet looks like. And as you can see, as far as I can see, it looks pretty normal. I've given it a little bit of a clean. In fact, there's no harm in giving it a bit more of a clean, but I've also cleaned out the contact hole. And this is why IBM keyboards are superior, right? Alright, gonna plug it back in and see what happens. And I've got nothing. Nothing so far anyway. So something, oh there we go, there's a connection. We're getting a P there. And I know that you can't make that out on screen, but with a direct press down, it is actually making a connection there. Not easily, I must say. I'm going to use the white piece of plastic, again, really good with names here. Let me just try and see if that makes any difference. And no, it doesn't. No difference whatsoever. There we go, we've got lots more P's there, just by holding it down. There we go, we've got a few more there. And it seems to be the more I press on the key, the more it comes to life. It's actually working now. Could this be a key coming back to life? Even pressing gently now, I'm getting luck. Holy mackerel. How good is that? Just as I was about to give up on the key, it came back to life. So I guess sometimes just a little bit of perseverance and a bit of elbow grease, and it just goes to show you can sometimes get anything working. And so I think it was very worthwhile taking apart the whole key. They're very fiddly to do. There's not much fun in taking apart the keycaps themselves, but I think that's actually worked out pretty well. This is the real fiddly bit, this bit here. The legs off the key top, these little legs at the top and the bottom, there. You can see this side is intact, but the other side, I'll just try and rotate it, it's a little bit cracked. So when I took it off, I just cracked it ever so slightly. It's actually not too bad. You can just see a sort of hairline fracture, but really quite tough to open up. You probably need some sort of specialized tool, which I didn't have. Please leave a comment in the comment section below. Let me know if you've ever played with the Sharp PC-7000 or one of its cousins or sisters and brothers, and if you've got any questions about the machine, then I'd love to know from you. But there you go, that's the Sharp PC-7000.